I want to thank the group for inviting me.
And down for the...
Right. I emailed Tom and told him I was going to compare our Chicago region project with the NAMA project. I've been involved with both for 14 years, since my start at the museum, Field Museum in 1997 with Greg Mueller. A lot of you are probably familiar with the NAMA, North American Mycological Association, national group that's sort of the umbrella group for all the clubs in the country, and they do a big national foray. The next one's in December in California, and two of the organizers are here. I want to make a plug that we sponsor 4 graduate students to help with the voucher project. So if you or someone you know wants to go to the foray to work with our voucher program, talk to me or Christian Swartz or Noah Siegel there about doing that. NAMA has been having forays since they started in 1961. And most of those forays still have surviving species lists that David Lewis put into a spreadsheet and then gave to me, and I merged them all together into a database. The blue dots there are previous forays that we have. Species lists, names on a list, they're all rumors. There's no specimens, no sequences. There's a few specimens from some of those old forays. I have some other ones from the Minnesota foray. This project was started in 1996 with Greg Mueller and Jack Murphy, and so we have 15 years now of forays with voucher specimens. But the quality of those specimens varies because of the way the foray is done. We still have 5 missing species lists if anybody happen to have that information for those forays. This hasn't been updated, but this is species accumulation chart for those forays. So the tall red bars are the number of species listed at a foray, and the white bars are the number of species added per foray to this accumulation. And we're still adding about 35 to 45 names to this accumulated list over time. But this goes back to the beginning, 1962. And we're up to getting close to 3,000, which is about getting close to a third of our low estimate of 10,000 for the country. Especially if Pluteus cervinus is how many species, because Pluteus cervinus is now #1 as recorded on most forays. It beat out Laccaria laccata. And I think that might be possibly because Greg separated all Laccaries out and told us what they all are. But nobody's done that for the Pluteus cervinus group, so that's still #1. The Chicago project, Greg started in '94 with John Paul Schmidt, who was a grad student at the time, and they started a plot study at Indiana Dunes looking at diversity there. And since then, we've expanded the kind of area that I'm considering the flora that I'm looking at for the Chicago region, which is based on Chicago Wilderness, a consortium of a lot of different environmental groups, and they picked this big watershed area, which works out to about 24 counties. So that's the area that I've been compiling names for our Chicago region. And vplants.org is the website that has all the plants for that region from 3 herbaria. Basically, we want to document the diversity and distribution of fungi across this Chicago area, and our funding has related it to human activities like burning for oak woodland restoration and several nitrogen deposition projects. And we have plot data, which gives us fungal community information, and also various sampling at other sites. So we have plots that are 1/10 hectare. These are the same size that Greg has used in Costa Rica and other people have used. And they're divided up in 40 quadrats, so it gives you some frequency data. And we have 2 or 4 plots per site that we run and visit about once a month during the season. We also have, we're all involved with the Illinois Mycological Association that's based in Chicago. They have forays throughout the season, and we basically go help with the foray, help identify, and then harvest the stuff they find, and thank them and educate them on what the different things are. Most of our club, as with some others, is focused heavily on edibles, and we do have a lot of good edibles. We also have a lot of inosabes and other cool things to record. So this is their Chicago Wilderness area, and these are the historic collections that were in the Field Museum herbarium that are data-based. It's focused around Chicago and the Indiana Dunes area. And the very early collections were made by taking the interurban trains out to various stops, getting off the train like at Miller near Gary and going out to the dunes and collecting stuff. So that was about 720 taxa from those collections, 2,000 some collections. The work we've done in the last 18 years, we have about 20,000 collections, 1,100 taxa. That's a conservative estimate. It's over that. We have a lot of still have a lot of unidentified material. And we focused again on Cook County and the Indiana Dunes area there in northwest Indiana. A lot of our work in Cook County is with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, which they require us to have permits for all our collecting. And the last several years, they've required the Mushroom Club to have permits for their forays. They're cracking down on mushroom collecting. So we have plots across several sites there and a lot of additional sites that we go to regularly with the club. This shows our major sites, number of plots we have there, visits over the 18 years, and number of observations. An observation is Urpex lacteus was on this stick in this quadrant of this plot on this date. And we have, hundreds of observations of the common stuff and only one or two of the rare things. Here's an example of accumulation curve for one plot, a 10th hectare, over time, going over 230 species for one 10th hectare. And that bottom curve there is the same curve as the previous one for one plot. So we have one plot, one site, one county, and the region that was through 2009. The thing I've been working on the last year or so is a checklist for the fungi recorded for Chicago, both our work and all the herbarium specimens for that region. And it's synonymy is a bear to go through, but and compiling the names. But estimate so far is around somewhere over 1,100 species. I have about 2,300 names reported. Over the 18 years, we've had funding from various large and small agencies. Our most recent funding was private donor in Chicago. And also a lot of permit granting are the agencies that run the properties. So here's comparison. Both projects, all macrofungi are collected. And identifications are dependent on who's there identifying. Like NAMA also includes lichens and slime molds a lot of the time, but their IDs are based on who is there. So lately, we have a bunch of lichenologists at the museum, so I've been taking lichens back and having them work on those. The specimens are at the Field Museum Herbarium, available for loan. Elsie borrowed Helvella recently for her project from both our Chicago and the NAMA collections. I've been using FileMaker Pro for 14 years, which I think is a really great, easy to use program to kind of design and build your own database system with a Windows interface. But it works on both platforms. Both involve a lot of people. At a NAMA foray, the people involved changes every year, but there's a core group that go to each foray. And in Chicago, there's less of a changeover in the people involved. Post-foray processing is done by me and a volunteer at the museum for the NAMA material. The Chicago material is similar to LCs where you collect one day and then you process the next day. The NAMA stuff is a whole different story where you have 200 people plus collecting for 3 or more days and bringing in cartloads or actually busloads of fungi and putting them out on tables, and then the people available to identify go through and wander up and down for hours putting names on things. So those identifications are based on who is there and who is interested in what. And some people like Rod Tullis and Peterson and Rick Kerrigan, they bring their microscopes and actually work on stuff at the foray or take split specimens and then report back when they figure out what things are. For our Chicago stuff, after all the material is processed from the plot work and so forth, at some later point we select what is vouchered, put in the permanent collections from that year. We have a bank of cabinets for all the local Chicago stuff in Ziploc bags on accession, but we later pick out the best representative material. At NAMA, the rule is we voucher 1 or sometimes 2 specimens from each species. And we usually voucher the first specimen that comes across the recording table line for that species, and it's not always the best thing. So if some much better collection comes later, we'll add another voucher. We don't get rid of the first voucher unless that there's some reason to, but so we do have some duplicates in the NAMA system. Because it's a weekend foray with several hundred people, we do have specimens missing in action. Either they disappear off the table or they rot overnight, some of the smaller things, or they mold on their way back to the museum after they've gotten taken off the dryer too early. So there's a little problems with voucher material quality as a term in terms of doing your own, like a, well, the worst case I saw was I came to the foray display table one morning and there was an agaricus specimen that was a brown writhing pile of, fly maggots. That one got tossed. We get, I don't know how, not too many get eaten by insects over the weekend. Oh, human. Oh, well, one foray. Yeah, there's always the macrophagy issue of vouchering versus eating. Most forays we don't have a problem at all, but there was one foray, I don't remember which one it was, where the chanterelles were in very short supply, and we had like a couple fruit bodies of 2 species, and they disappeared off the table and went into the cooler. And I tracked down and figured out they were set aside for the macrophagy session, like loaves and fishes, I guess is what they were thinking. But I retrieved those but we try to have a table marked for these things are going to macrophagy rather than the ID tables. Taxon concepts are a little more uniform perhaps at Chicago because it's the same people you're working year to year, whereas NAMA depends who's there. And also since I'm at the foray and I'm at each NAMA foray, I see the same thing come across the table with a different name. If I know, I mean, there's lots of stuff I don't know, but if I see a geostrum one foray with 3 different names on it, some of that could get sorted out after the foray. So one project is a long-term study of one area. NAMA is a snapshot once a year, all buckshot across the country wherever they can have a foray. But there's not as much metadata associated with those collections. Problems I have is I'm swamped with collections and taxa when I have to do all macrofungi with just me and an assistant. I've been working with Wyatt Gaswick recently, who he took over boletes and russulas and xylarias and a few other things. NAMA, I've been trying to think of a better system for the competing needs of having mushrooms on display versus things vouchered. Some important things that come in, we have one specimen, you know, 2 fruit bodies or maybe 1 fruit body. And how long do you put that on display before you take that and put it on the dryer? And one thing I want to change, I've been trying to change, is they have a traditional walkthrough of the display table Sunday morning at the end of the foray, several days after things have been piling up. And I want to have like shorter walkthroughs during the foray to go over what's there before they all disappear, because a lot of the stuff goes on the dryer Saturday night. I compiled this, and I was kind of interested in effort versus taxa. So a full-time project for one region, we have 1,100 taxa for the new work for the last 18 years. Whereas the 15 years of NAMA forays, we have more taxa from a long weekend once a year with post-processing. So one is like a local flora with lots of metadata, and one is a national look at the flora with much less you know, associated with data, because location data and so forth is sparse on a lot of the NAMA stuff. So, any questions on that? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the Chicago stuff there. A lot of our local habitats is kind of stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, that too, yeah. We're dealing with oak-dominated habitat, very little conifers, mostly just hardwood forest, not even much birch and so forth. So the habitat range is much less. Also, we're dealing now with very dry summers. So our things added each year is shrinking.
What about images? Do they capture images of what gets saved as a voucher?
Yeah, so we take photos on gray cards of the NAMA specimens,
Okay.
and I do the same thing with our local stuff. Those need to be organized. We started putting the NAMA ones on Mushroom Observer. It's easier to get those up on there than on our
Right.
museum database, which now is getting more integrated with their new Drupal website. So there was a delay in getting that on the museums because they were changing their system.
Have you found any long-term trends relating to air pollution, nitrates, or anything like that in terms of fruiting or changes in communities?
Haven't analyzed a lot of that. One of the projects that Peter Avis worked with us on is the nitrogen addition for 3 years, and he found definite decrease in diversity by like 20% on the roots of diversity of fungi. But we didn't see any remarkable difference above ground because the above ground fruiting data is so, there's so much noise in that data. We are finding new species, and whether that's because it's a crapshoot when you go out and collect what you find. Doing some of those curves from before is like, it doesn't matter if we visit the same site time after time or visit a new site. We're going to add species to what we know. And a couple months ago, I went on Mushroom Observer and found somebody had found Amanita muscaria under these pine trees at the picnic area at a site we've been to for 16 years. And every time we go there, I look under the pine trees, but you know,
And not a species.
no, we never, and we missed it, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Can you give us an approximation of the error rate of both NAMA and the Chicago group in terms of identifications?
A lot of both are what you called field IDs. Some of the groups like Amanita and like Agaricus and things that people have worked on at both NAMA, at NAMA with microscope verification, and some years the Russella stuff are more stable. But like, you know, we have the Plutus cervinus thing. Locally, the Chicago stuff, there's certain groups that I know well, and then certain groups that we just, like curtistioids, we collect, you know, and take pictures, but they get dried and, you know, it's
Nobody looks at it.
unknowns. I don't even have a genus on a lot of that.
Okay,
Thank you.